right, we are live. Not really. This is pre-recorded, but welcome back. So if you're watching this video, you're here because you want to know more about this HB67. This was called an act to expand the healthcare workforce in North Carolina. It was enacted as Session Law 2025-37 in July 2025, so literally just last month. But we're just all now kind of becoming aware of it. Now, this is officially titled the Healthcare Workforce Reforms Bill. This passed the House unanimously, 117-0, 3 abstained back in April 2025. It passed in the Senate 46-0, June 25th. We got Oscar back. And then Stein signed it July 1st. So just about a month and a half ago, almost 2 months ago. All this is supposed to start taking place January 1st. And just a little factoid that I found in here. So, again, the goal is to be unbiased, but this is kind of a wild bill, really. But North Carolina has 200 physicians per 100,000 residents, which is below the national average. Expand the healthcare workforce. Who could be against that? But we know how this all goes. Every time something is called an expansion, it's usually a downgrade, whether it's government, housing. Now, this expansion of healthcare workforce, it usually means lowering standards, cutting corners, and treating rural America like a sandbox, specifically here in North Carolina with HB 67. So I'm not going to read all 48 or so pages of the bill to you verbatim. I'm just going to kind of tap on a few sections of this bill. Well, I mean, it's signed now, rather. If we sound the alarm and we get more people on this, people in positions who can do something about this, we can maybe do something. So again, I'm not going to read this whole thing to you, but we are going to cover a few things. So let's get into it. The Interstate Medical Licensure Compact. This comes from Section 90-21. It says the purpose of this article is to strengthen access to healthcare, and in recognition of the advances in the delivery of healthcare, the member states of the Interstate Medical Licensure Compact, or Compact, have allied in common purpose to develop a comprehensive process that complements the existing licensing and regulatory authority of state medical boards, and to provide a streamlined process that allows physicians to become licensed in multiple states, thereby enhancing the probability and portability of a medical license and ensuring the safety of patients. The Interstate Medical Licensure Compact creates another pathway for licensure and does not otherwise change a state's existing Medical Practice Act or provisions. The compact adopts the prevailing standard for licensure and affirms that the practice of medicine occurs where the patient is located at the time of the physician-patient encounter, and therefore requires the physician to be under the jurisdiction of the state medical board where the patient is located. State medical boards that participate in the compact retain the jurisdiction to impose an adverse action against a license to practice medicine in that state issued to the physician through the procedures of the compact. What is this? Great, a compact. What this means is the state is giving away its own sovereignty, and this is dressed up as efficiency. Now, this is going to set up a national multi-state board, which will override local control. Now, it says member boards retain the jurisdiction, but it says disciplinary actions are shared across states, and that's Section 90-21. If a doctor gets in trouble in Kentucky, he's toast in North Carolina as well. Now, on the surface, that sounds like accountability, but in reality, it's surveillance and it's federalism hollowed out. Instead of North Carolina setting its own medical standards, we're going to be outsourcing it to a commission in D.C. or wherever it could be headquartered. So think about that. Would you let some bureaucrat in Illinois decide who gets to practice medicine in your county? Because that's exactly what this compact does. And worst of all, once you're in, you can't leave. cleanly. The withdrawal clause states that states are stuck for 180 days, section 90-21.184. So again, that's like a bad cell phone contract that you can't get out until you paid a penalty and stayed for 6 months. So again, losing state sovereignty, this basically turned into nothing more than like a subscription plan. But again, this is the state losing its sovereignty straight out of the gate, okay? Now, I won't read this whole next section to you, but this is probably one of the most important sections of this entire bill. And if you live in rural North Carolina, which is defined as an area that has a population density of 500 or less people per square mile, as defined by this bill at least, which is a pretty substantial amount of places here in North Carolina, this is important to you. So this reads from section 90-12.03. Internationally trained physician employee license. A, the board may issue an internationally trained physician employee license to practice medicine and surgery to a physician when the board has received satisfactory verification of all of the following requirements. The applicant has been offered employment as a physician in a full-time capacity at a hospital that is located in North Carolina, licensed by the state of North Carolina, or a medical practice located in a rural county with a population of less than 500 people per square mile in North Carolina, where a physician fully licensed by the state under this chapter is physically practicing on-site at the rural medical practice. Now, listen closely. The applicant has a current and active license in good standing to practice medicine in a foreign country, or had that type of license expire no more than 5 years prior to submission of an application to the board. Just going to let that sit for a second. So again, this allows doctors whose medical license expired up to 5 years ago in another country to come practice here in North Carolina, specifically and only in rural communities who again are defined as the 500 people or less per 1 square mile. And again, that's 5 years. So if you're a surgeon and you haven't practiced since 2020, say COVID, do you think you're razor sharp today, just as sharp as you were 5 years ago? Skills decay, medicine evolves. And now we're just saying, hey, if you're from a foreign country, come to our rural area. This is what Cooper was talking about when he said we're going to help the rural communities. And this is what Stein talks about when they say they're going to help the rural communities. This is that doublespeak stuff. And again, I will make sure I stress this. This is not anti-immigrant ranting. This is standards. My family, your family, rural America, rural North Carolina specifically. We deserve the best care, not an expired credential from who knows where. So again, you got to ask yourself, why aren't these doctors, why isn't this allowed to go to, say, Chapel Hill or Duke Medical Center? It's going to go to Wilkes County or Robeson. Out to the rural communities where they're already affected by, again, we highlighted it earlier. You know, what was it? Well, what was it? 200 physicians to 100,000 residents. And that's the whole state over. That's not counting these places out in the sticks. So again, this is low key insulting. It's degrading, and it's exactly how rural America is viewed by our ruling class. Just a sandbox to come play in. And I can't stress that enough. That is such a crazy section of this bill. That is really what inspired me to do a video in the first place on this bill. Because I feel like a lot of people they're not hearing that part. Anybody on the internet who's talking about this bill has not said that part one time. These doctors can come to the rural areas And as long as their license hasn't been expired for more than 5 years, they basically get a fast track to be the doctor or practicing physician, rather, in that area. Rural settings only, not Charlotte, not Raleigh. So it's pretty crazy, man. And everybody who's been, just at least talking about this bill, they don't even highlight that part. I feel like that is just the most mind-blowing part of it. Moving on, though. This comes from Section 90-9.3A. This is requirements for team-based practice as physician's assistant. In order to practice as a team-based physician assistant, a physician assistant shall meet all the following conditions. Practice in team-based settings as defined in General Statute 90-1. Have more than 4 hours of clinical practice experience as a licensed physician assistant and more than 1,000 hours of clinical practice experience within the specific medical specialty of practice with a physician in that specialty. So again, 4,000 hours is roughly about 2 years of practice. So after that, no direct supervision. It's just teams. And what is the team-based model? A PA with a few years under their belt, rather, is now essentially running clinics, prescribing meds, making calls that used to require 10 years of training. And again, this is in the rural communities, the poor counties, the underserved counties. The elite hospitals aren't going to cut the standards. Duke, again, Wake, no. They're not staffing PAs without oversight in their ICUs. In the small town ERs, though, the back road clinics, they are getting downgraded. This is a two-tier system. Rich counties get the doctors, poor counties get physician assistants, barely overseen, overworked, and underexperienced. You're not expanding care. You're rationing excellence. You're not expanding care. You're rationing excellence. And so you see, this is just, it gets worse and worse and worse. This comes from Section 90-85.3. Practice of pharmacy. A pharmacist may advise and educate patients and healthcare providers concerning therapeutic values, content, uses, and significant problems of drugs and devices. I won't read through this whole thing, but again, this is where we're coming from, 90.85. And so what this is getting at here is starting in 2025, pharmacists can order CLIA waived, test, and treat influenza. So the guy who fills your Tylenol is now diagnosing the flu, and by law, insurers are forced to cover this. This comes from Section 58-3-241B. So the state is basically saying now that the pharmacists are doctors now, and they're going to pay for it. And again, this is just in the name of supposedly taking care of our health care and boosting our health care. Now, this was another interesting one, too. This is the psychological associates. This comes from Section 90-270. Let me see where the juicy part is real quick. Yes. Okay, so we'll start at Section H here. A licensed psychological associate who possesses a certification as health services provider, psychological associate in accordance with subsection C of this section may provide health services without supervision upon meeting the requirements in General Statute 90-270. Notwithstanding the provision of subsection H of this section, a licensed psychological associate who has licensed before June 30th, 2013, who can demonstrate in accordance with board rules that he or she has been engaged in provision of health services psychology under supervision for 4,000 hours within a time period of at least 24 consecutive months and less than 60 consecutive months shall meet the requirements for certification as a health service provider psychological associate. So the licensed psychological associates, there's now master levels, not PhDs, and they get full independence after 4,000 supervised hours. Again, that's about 2 years. So mental health is already fragile in North Carolina. Suicide rates climbing. Fentanyl is crazy. The solution, let's lower the standards, pump out more mid-level providers, and let's just hope for the best. This allows for an LPA who is licensed before 2013 in their sponsoring country and who has completed 4,000 hours of supervised health services psychology within a consecutive 2 to 5 year period at any point in time, which this could be 2008, it could be 2020. If they meet this requirement, LPAs can provide health services without supervision. That's like saying the bridge is collapsing, so let's hire more construction workers who last built a decade ago. More bodies, especially outdated bodies, doesn't equal more quality. It's a cheap, fast, shallow fix. The one we'll say is a net positive in the bill, and I highlight it, so we'll call this a little positive Oreo here. One little sliver, this is that inflation Oreo, one tiny layer of good in the middle with gigantic, terrible cookies on top and bottom. But they are, I'll just read it here, Section 131E. Each hospital licensed under this part shall adopt and implement policies that require the use of smoke evacuation filtering systems during any surgical procedure that is likely to generate surgical smoke. So they're going to filter the smoke out. I tried and I couldn't find the bad in it, so we'll say that's a W. And here's, again, another example of where they're going to lower the bar. This comes from the marriage therapist section. Reciprocal licenses. The board, this comes from section, 90-270. The board shall issue a license as a marriage and family therapist or a marriage and family therapy associate by reciprocity. This comes from 90-270. Reciprocal licenses. The board shall issue a license as a marriage and family therapist or a marriage and family therapy associate by reciprocity to any person who applies for the license as prescribed by the board and who at all times during the application process has been licensed and actively practicing for 5, at least 2 continuous years, and is currently licensed as a marriage and family therapist or marriage and family therapy associate in another state. So what this says is that what used to take 5 years now takes 2 years. So this is just another example of lowering standards. And if you read further in this bill, they actually specifies that California's exam is acceptable, which, California is a literal total dumpster fire. So, you know what I'm saying? Like, what are we even tapping into California for on that? And then another, just a section that we'll highlight here. This is a community college behavioral health workforce enhancement. An associate professional, AP, may be a graduate of a community college with an associate degree in human services field with less than 2 years of experience with the population served. Qualified professional may be a graduate of a community college with an associate degree in human services field and has 2 years of full-time or pre or post-associate degree accumulated supervised mental health, developmental disabilities, and substance abuse services experience with the population served. Part 3, qualified substance abuse prevention professional, QSAP, may be a graduate of a community college with an associate degree in human services field and has 2 years of full-time or pre or post-associate degree accumulated supervised experience in addictions and recovery prevention. So they're dropping this down to 2 years. And that's really where, that's the synopsis of this bill, and how does it improve, or how is it going to tackle the deficit in healthcare in North Carolina? And in simple terms, by lowering the bar. HB67 is not reform. Foreign doctors with expired license, PAs unleashed after 4,000 hours, pharmacists diagnosing flu, master's therapists practicing solo, national compact surveilling everyone. Come on, man. Who benefits? Hospitals save money, insurance companies expand networks, politicians claim victory, but who loses? You and I, our families, and especially, again, the rural communities of North Carolina, which I'll define again, 500 people or less per square mile. That's many places in North Carolina. So this essentially is American decline written into law, where we are lowering standards, decentralizing our excellence, and centralizing power. And if you think this is just about healthcare, think again. It's the same template for every sector: education, policing, infrastructure. Lower the bar, outsource accountability, and leave the American people with the scraps. But we don't have to accept this. We can call out the downgrade. We can demand investment into our own doctors, our own training programs, our own standards. We can fight the compacts that strip our sovereignty, because North Carolina deserves excellence, not experiments. Our people deserve a healthcare system worthy of our dignity, not a patchwork of shortcuts. And if we don't hold the line here, if we don't fight back on this, HB67 isn't just going to be our story. It will be the national model. 40 plus states and U.S. territories have already adopted similar legislation. So we got to fight back, man. We have to say there's no more lowering the bar on this. Now, again, you can Google this bill. This is HB67. Read all this for yourself. In post, I'm going to put these bills on the side here. So you should have been able to read all this with me in real time. But if you got this far, thank you for watching. Reach out to your local representative and let them know that they have to do whatever they can to get rid of HB67. Like, I literally just became aware of this thing not too long ago, after it was already signed. But I know teamwork makes the dream work. We'll leave it at that. Thank you for watching. Please like, please comment. Let me know how you feel about this bill. Am I seeing it wrong? You know what I mean? Let me know. And subscribe. We're going to, of course, this is, whoop, whoa, there it is. NC first. We need to look out for ourselves. And that's another reason why I started this. I just kind of noticed that there's really not anybody out there who's making sure that the people who don't watch mainstream news all the time know what's going on. So here's to that. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next episode.